Andrew, I am super excited to start this portion of our trip here at Purdue University, and excited to have another repeat guest on. Really, really appreciate, Ignacio, you taking time to join us. You've had a full day. What our listeners and audience doesn't know is this is being recorded after normal business hours, but greatly appreciate you guys hosting us here. When we had you on the podcast last time, you were at K-State, right? So a little bit of a move here for you. But just, I guess, go ahead, introduce yourself to our listeners who haven't heard from you yet, and talk a little bit about your journey to get here to Purdue.
Yeah, I'm Ignacio Ciampitti. As you can see for my southern accent, it's not Florida, so you need to go a little bit south just to keep you guessing on that. I will probably disclose at the end. I did my PhD at Purdue, so that's the beauty about
Okay.
Yeah, it's almost like coming back home.
Yeah.
Full cycle.
So were you under?
Tony Vine.
Oh, really? Nice.
So I worked with Tony, working in cropping systems, and one of my topics on the research was natural use efficiency in corn.
Nice.
So, and I left Purdue 2013, moved to K-State. I was in K-State from May 2013, almost close to, I would say 11 years plus at K-State.
Wow. Okay.
So I did there basically all the steps on assistant, associate, and full professor.
Yeah.
And honestly, I was enjoying it. If you were seeing what I was doing, we have a big team. Always many things going on. That's something exciting on my side. But then it came this opportunity, and sometimes these big opportunities, they just come only once. So, and then the thing that really excited me was Purdue is a place that I call home. It was the first step, arriving from a different country.
Yeah.
And I feel that we just put some roots in this place. And when you see the entire transformation, because I left in 2013, and when I'm seeing all the transformation that happens in the last 10 years, a little bit plus, here, it's impressive.
It is,
and really, that's one of the things that really excited to say. You start seeing these kind of virtual pieces on the puzzle, and you say, if we can get there and start connecting all these pieces, we can get a lot of stuff done. And being a little bit visionary myself, I'm trying to think about, where we should go moving forward. I was attracted to this idea that Purdue was putting together, and it was coming from the department and the college, these positions that they call dream hires. And basically, there are positions that are trying to recruit different talent from different places. And some of this is really just to set kind of the stage and trying to provide kind of a new fresh look and bring some kind of a new insights. I think that these positions are being very transformative.
Yeah.
And the second point, just to keep it short on this, that excited me quite a bit was this big challenge of co-directing, and then moving on the direction of this digital ag institute. So
yeah,
for me, I was the one funding with other faculty at K-State that, and I think that I left good friends and people that is running that institute there, which is amazing. And coming here and having that challenge is quite good, because I think that the future is about building teams, working with industry, working with partnerships and collaborations, and I think that the institute is going to be reflecting all that. So we are moving on that direction, and with the challenge that is going to be, agriculture and then technology in the future.
Coming off of one of the hardest growing seasons that I can remember in my lifetime with so many unique challenges, I was excited when Andrew and I started talking about coming out to campus, and just looking at the horsepower that exists within the agriculture school here is just really impressive. It's going to be, for us, I don't think I have enough notebook paper. This was full when we got on campus, and I'm already halfway through it, and we're not even through the first day yet, so it's going to be really fun. But Andrew, as we as we start our show, I know you're going to introduce our topic, but Ignacio, one of the things that we really like to ask our guests when we start, and we asked you this in your previous episode, but just thinking about agriculture today, not necessarily tied to our topic, but what are you really excited about?
I mean, you can see, and from the people that is getting to know me on campus now, I mean, they can see how excited I'm about this idea of building collaborations and bringing people together. Because, I mean, one of the big challenges that I think that we need to, I would say, be honest with us and identify is like this problem that agriculture is facing very tight margins. Mm-hmm. And technology sometimes is moving faster than adoption. And in many situations, when you start looking at how we can help farmers in the future and be more effective, we need to start training different people. I mean, the companies, the industry is asking today for different type of skills and expertise. And we haven't designed, if you look at our academic trainings, we haven't designed this idea of how to be more multidisciplinary. And then when you bring that concept, I mean, and it's part of our institute, no? When you start seeing students that are interacting with someone in computer science and someone, and these are agronomists, that they're interacting with someone in engineering, for me that is amazing. And that's the thing that keeps me moving every day, like this ability that the challenges that we're going to face are very complex, and we know that they're not going to be solved by one person. We need to start building teams. We need to bring more partners. We need to do co-innovation with industry. We really need to start getting us closer to say, how do we solve some of these big problems?
The answer is phenomenal, and it makes me think of the time that we spent with Matt Darr and his team at the Innovation Lab at Iowa State, you know, and some of the collaborative work they're doing. And so super appreciative of that response, and your recognition that, you know, margins are tight and we've got to keep the farmer in mind, right? Because sometimes there's innovation because we're designed to innovate, but certainly we're ultra sensitive to that today, I think, because there's a lot of really cool stuff happening. Yeah. There's also a lot of people in our industry that are hurting and need to be thinking about profitability and ROI. So, Andrew, as we get started today, I guess tell our listeners and viewers what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be here talking to Ignacio. You know, he kind of touched on the people here, and you touched on the horsepower here. You know, again, I've said this with Sean Castile. You know, I'm an Iowa State guy, but man, the people and the HP that they got here at Purdue, it's pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. So you know, we're going to hold true to our science and management. You know, the typical part 1 and part 2 with our show. We're going to talk about nitrogen and digital agriculture, and both these maybe a little bit separate. And then with Ignacio's role, which is kind of cool, we're going to talk about and learn and understand how these two different areas within crop production can collide and work together. And, you know, you talked about partnerships, so I think that's a huge thing. And, I mean, you're right that the more technology that we have, you know, it's going to take multidisciplinary work and people partnering together to solve some of these problems. Whether it's increasing yields or becoming, you know, more efficient with what we do. So I figured it'd open up. And Ignacio, can you tell us about some of the research that your lab's doing?
Yeah, and it's connected to what I mentioned before. So if you enter to my lab today, you will start seeing people from different expertise. I mean, you start seeing the traditional agronomist that basically is doing some work on getting some field data and doing some typical management information, and then you see some guys that they go deep on the physiology to try to understand the plant and where the nitrogen is moving, but then you start exploring, and then one of the things that we start doing more and more is just to start bringing into our team people that they are a little bit outside of the ag too, and embracing people that is like they wanted to know about ag, but they were expertise on maybe computer science. Or they wanted to know about ag, but they were experts probably in remote sensing, so in using satellite or flying drones. Yep. And we start slowly realizing that synergy of putting together in the same team, in a same place, someone that understands agronomy very well, someone that talks about remote sensing, satellite drones, someone that basically understands how to put things together, data, and modeling, and the magic is impressive. And I think that I'm always trying to preach on that direction of saying that we want to at least to contribute something to the science. If there is something that is building your legacy for the future, is to say we contribute to build the next generation of thinkers. The people that basically industry today is asking. When I talk to some of the folks on many companies, they say, we're recruiting a person that knows how to do this, and this.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Right?
I know exactly
you look
what
at the
you
job
mean.
positions and you say, well, are you looking for one guy or four?
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
breeding is a prime example, right? You go from the traditional breeders to now you got to know about computer and quantitative. I mean, it's quite a bit different. A lot of different subjects.
And I always tell that we don't want to get away of your area of expertise. I don't want to convert a person that feels comfortable being a physiologist or being an agronomist. But what I would like for that person to do at the end of this master's, PhD, or whatever is your training process, is to make sure that you know how to communicate with other people.
Yeah.
That's all. I don't need to have an expert on data science or statistics or I only just want to embrace that there is other people that are working on similar topics that if you check with them, if you know how to reach out to them and communicate with them, you will be able to be that person in the middle that is the one that usually integrates. And I think that that's the magic where it happens. And most of the times the people that they can integrate topics and those are going to be basically, from my personal opinion, the true leaders on really bringing the next revolution in agriculture, because I think that this idea of technology, and I make a distinction when Sean mentioned this also too, is like, I mean, we need to look at what are the problems and then build the solutions.
Yeah.
The innovation just for the innovation sake, I mean, it's not getting us anywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
I spend a lot of time in kind of I really like the ag tech startup space.
Yes.
And it's amazing how often something comes out of that space where it's like it might be a cool idea, or they figured out something and do something. You're like, okay, but does anybody actually okay, cool, but are we actually solving a problem? Did anybody need that problem solved? But yeah.
My question is always, one of the questions that I have always is, have you ever talked to a farmer?
Right, yeah.
Or have you ever talked to your end user?
Right.
You know? A focus group or any kind of a connection or communication that you have with someone to say, what do you think about this?
Right. Oftentimes it's scary that the answer is no, they haven't.
Agreed. Well, Ignacio, let's take advantage of some of your knowledge on nitrogen. You know, again, we're going to break the science and management portion up into nitrogen, digital agriculture. What's your thoughts on 2025? Obviously, we had an extremely wet spring across the Corn Belt. You know, thinking about some of the leaching, denitrification, just nitrogen use efficiency that, you know, you get a grower that maybe puts all of his nitrogen on the fall. What's your thoughts on just the 2025 growing season and maybe some of those, you know, environmental conditions that impacted nitrogen?
Very, very challenging. So, and I think that you kind of, in this short synopsis that you just did, I mean, you describe what's going on, no? And I think that I remember saying this to you guys on our previous podcast. It's like, I always feel when I talk to anyone that, I mean, farmers, they need to almost play a gamble. So they go to a casino and they say, okay, 100 to the red. It's almost like saying, you go too early in the growing season and you say, I'm going to have an exceptional year. This year is going to be 250 bushels. So I'm going to go all in. 200 pounds, 250 pounds. And you have a year like this, this is challenging, but it's also good because it's making us to rethink if this is the best way that we are doing things. And this is where we can discuss more later, I mean, how I think that technology can help us more. Because today, some of the problems why in-season nitrogen is not becoming something more popular is because the revenue and if you look at profits are very small. The science is great. I mean, I think that spoon-feeding a crop is probably the best that we should be able to do. But if you look at the logistics for the farmer, it's painful.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at everything that he's doing, and then you are now asking him to do something else. Yeah. And they are telling already that lack of time is a problem for them, and lack of labor, no?
Yep.
Piggybacking, Andrew, on your comment about the rainfall this spring, you know, so we had, I think in most of the Corn Belt, excessive rainfall and all the way into, in a lot of places, July, even knocking on the door of August. And so, our initial gut reaction to that is we're losing probably a lot of our synthetically applied nitrogen, and there's some vulnerability there. But then we have this conversation around mineralization, right? And so we have high organic matters and the ability to, which we talked about, in the last episode that we had with you. But I guess as you think about that in a year like this, in a lot of cases, it didn't seem like nitrogen was one of the limiting factors in the 2025 crop. So is that due to really high mineralization? And do you have a, obviously we cover a pretty big geography with the show, but do you have an idea on how high those mineralization rates might have been in 2025?
I would say yes, in some way. I mean, I think that you described pretty well what was the scenario for 2025. We have a very wet early season, so we have some, I would say some parts of Indiana, if you look at central, even if you go south, that we were planting super late. So you are going to a planting time very late. So the only thing that was beneficial for some of those fields that they got planted late, the duration of the growing season, so your yield potential is somewhat penalized. But then what you are doing is you are timing your mineralization much better.
Yeah.
Because those plants are basically getting into an environment that they're growing much faster. And we talked about this last time. Imagine that you are planting your corn, let's say that you are planting mid-April. So for that corn to get all the way to get enough roots and to capture nitrogen, so it takes like a month and a half. Very slow early season, very, very slow because those temperatures fluctuate all April, no much growth. And imagine when you put it on June, that crop is profile that is plenty of water, and then that crop is just speeding up. With temperatures start speeding up, and then mineralization is just right there, because it happens usually around basically mid-June. So you are almost matching and improving that in some way, the synchrony that crop is speeding up, and then that nitrogen is becoming available. So what we are seeing is that one potential explanation is, yes, some of the leaching that we experienced this year that was probably quite a bit substantial in many situations, it can be, in some way offset by that mineralization that was more timely. And then if you look at in some of these places that got planted late, the yield potential got penalized. So the amount of nitrogen that was needed to really maximize yields. And many times our limiting factors came from other conditions. Like, here we got in some environments really dry at the end of the season. So surprisingly, after like August, we started getting really dry. I think that Iowa, you guys don't have that problem, but here we got.
Well, we did. We did though. It would have been mid-August. It kind of shut off pretty hard, and so it was kind of weird because it was. I think we started harvest in like the dead center of Iowa with like 170% of annual rainfall, but then it was 5 or 6 weeks where it didn't rain at all, so it made it pretty complicated. Andrew never lets me pre-read this stuff, so I'm sometimes just going to interject my questions here. I have a question around mineralization rates. So if you're planning, and maybe we can discuss some of this in management, but if you're planning your nitrogen, we know our mineralization rates can be really low and up to 300-400 pounds, right?
Very high.
But if you were just to make a generic statement, if you took a percent organic matter, do you guess at a number, or is that just not even possible anymore with our weather patterns?
It's really, really hard. Really, really hard. And I give you an example. There was a study that I remember that we analyzed some of that data in Kansas. Close to Kansas City, So we will look at more than 20 years of data. So, and one proxy of mineralization that is quite good is when you look at your situation unfertilized treatment. So, and you will say, okay, I'm looking at only one location, 20 years. I'm guessing that the variability on that is going to be very low.
Correct.
And you start looking at that treatment, that those plots that never got fertilized, and the variability by year, and we're talking about that some years we're going to dry years going to 75 bushels, wet years going to 200 bushels. And you start thinking about, okay, so how much nitrogen is then available, and then what is the average? And then you start seeing that in some places in good soils, I mean, you might get 120, 140 pounds, I mean, coming from mineralization, pretty average. But the challenge is that, and we need to explain to the audience, is that this is a co-regulation process. It's a process that is regulated by weather conditions impacting soil and mineralization and plant growth. That weather is also impacting how much the plant is growing. So even if you have a high supply and the plant is not coming at the same time, that co-regulation process is not happening. So, and we need to explain that it's so complex, not to match exactly the mineralization process. And believe it or not, we usually talk about corn only about this, but for soybeans, it's also another issue too. Because many times that you are only just saying, okay, these soybeans are okay, they're fixing nitrogen. I'm not worried about this. We have seen situations where that fixation level, no, and we have data that it went down very quickly when soybeans were basically planting too late and they were using too much nitrogen from the soil.
Yeah.
Because they became lazy.
No.
So cheap, no? And the timing on how you time your planting and what time mineralization happens is so critical, because if you plant your soybeans and mineralization, it happens really fast. You have around there 30, 60 days that if the plants are not basically establishing that fixation on soybeans, poof.
Would you say it's true, Ignacio, that we have all these variability in weather, but with across the Corn Belt where we have the freeze-thaw that we experience for winter, would you say that the mineralization early season like that we would see in April is a little bit more consistent?
I would say...
And then as we get into like the June, July, when the weather typically dries out, warms up, rain shuts off, then it becomes more inconsistent?
Yeah.
Or is that not what we see?
No, I would say yes. And I think that if we go back to 2025, no? I think that 2025 is another really good year that is giving a testimony that every year is different. And what I think that, I don't know if it's on my timeline, no, during my life, what I'm starting to see in the last decade is how erratic precipitation has been becoming. No, in the past you were saying, oh, usually precipitation will follow this pattern, April, May. And now we have some years that you have June with a lot of rain, July and nothing in August, or you have some years that you have extremely heat in June.
Yeah.
So, and I think that, again, the weather is adding some complexity, but it's also because most of the rains, when they come in, they are not some effective water that plant can use, because if the rain comes in 2 hours and a high intensity, and if I get 10 inches, we need to explain to people that water is not almost available for that plant.
Yeah.
That what the plant might be able to use is some, and then some that it will stay in the soil, but most of that rain is gone.
Yeah.
And most of the things that you start seeing are patterns of precipitations that they are becoming like that. They are becoming high intensity, very, very, very isolated, and it's really creating more complications for us. And I think that it's going to be creating more complications in the future about how do we become better in managing nitrogen, how do we become better in managing and be more proactive. You know? I mean, because many times we are doing things that are reactive. We just see the problem and we say, okay, we need to fix it.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to say. We need to be more proactive with all the technology we have, anything we're doing versus reactive.
Yeah. Well, and it is infinitely complex and getting more complex. You know, the weather certainly is erratic, right? If we asked to take a guess at next year, I don't think any of us would have a high level of confidence. Part of what we've talked about the last few weeks thinking through the growing season was, even with disease modeling or nitrogen modeling or whatever, right? The erratic weather takes what we historically know and makes it even that much harder to predict. And then you started the show talking about the economics of farming right now, and that's really challenging, right? Because when we have lower revenues and guys are looking for efficiency, sometimes the behaviors we back to maybe what we feel more secure in, so less eagerness to test. I think it's a really good kind of segue. Obviously, in a lot of the Corn Belt, right, harvest is finishing or near finishing. We're starting to see a lot of anhydrous ammonia go on. Guys are making decisions, but I think it's a good segue to kind of talk about some of this technology and some of the digital tools that we have. So What's your thoughts around some of the technology looking at like the instant availability to read ammonium levels or nitrate levels in the soil and leaf tissues? How are you thinking about those?
Well, I mean, I will get back to, and I will use some of the preface that you did in terms of looking at the weather. And I think that I always tell the following to many people. When you start taking a decision in April about your nitrogen rates, you're taking a decision for something that most likely is going to happen around mid-July. So imagine that in many situations, when you turn on the TV tonight, and you look at forecast for the next 7 days, they don't even are on top of 7 days.
Right.
The target on 7 days, you might say, yeah, tomorrow most likely. But Friday, Saturday.
Right.
So, and I'm thinking about, okay, how is a farmer taking this decision when you're trying to take a decision that is going to be happening most likely, and the outcome, you're going to see it in 3 months? So for that farmer, I mean, the level of uncertainty, and sometimes we don't want to talk about this war because it looks like so complex and academic, but we need to start talking about this, that we are taking a high risk. I mean, and the farmers are really, people need to understand that farmers are really risk takers. And making very thin margins, but really being super professional risk takers. And that level is something that we need to think about. How do we help them to move in different direction?
Yeah.
And of course, as I mentioned before, I love technology. I'm always on top of, looking at things that are new and looking at, we have a new way that we can do soil sampling, and there is a new company that can help us to do like an automatic soil sampling machine. Great. Some of those innovations are going to be effective because they're going to be helping us to get more data and digitalize soil and building soil maps and knowing more about our variability. But I believe that one of the things that I can consider that could potentially help us to bring a new revolution is all these phenomena on autonomous. So you start seeing how slowly things are evolving on that. And I'm not talking about only just I'm excited about the machine driving alone in the fields. What I'm excited is about helping the farmers to reduce that uncertainty. Because if a farmer you need to take a decision on any inputs, no? But in this case, we're talking about nitrogen 3 months ahead. I would like to find a way to help the farmers to take those decisions with 1 or 2 weeks ahead. So, and I know that the possibility of bringing some of these new technologies, for example, like autonomous robotics, where they can enter into your fields maybe 4 or 5 times from mid-April to mid-July, and they start basically sensing and timing the nitrogen application, for me is like amazing. If you start thinking about that we are sitting here doing another podcast 20 years, and we're talking that this is already happening.
Yeah.
And you say, we're helping the farmers to reduce the risk, because now they need to take a decision that is basically coming from that machine, but it's something that they are taking a decision sensing 2 weeks before flowering and deciding, do I need more nitrogen? No, the weather is going to turn dry. Okay, avoid the application. And really, most of these inputs and most of the decisions that we need to take, we need to have some return of investment. We need to have some way that we can help farmers to reduce the risk, reduce this uncertainty, and make sure that we understand, okay, what is the return of investment for this practice? For each of the practices, all the decisions that you're taking in the field, do we know that today?
It's funny you say that because, I sit here, you made a cool comment talking about, just using autonomy to maybe reduce the risk, maybe 4 or 5 passes throughout the growing season. And I'm sitting back here, I see some of the technology that, like Deere's working on for the autonomous grain cart operator, right? Yeah. And I feel the pain of growers trying to get enough help for semis, for grain cart operators. But as someone that does a lot of high yield talks and promotes split applications, promotes wide drop and exact drop, and I have yet to think about how autonomy would benefit those growers that want to do it, but they don't have the machines or the manpower to do that. Yeah. So that's pretty that can be pretty impactful, thinking about where we can go with some of this stuff. It reduces the risk too, right? It's not just about manpower, but people want to split apply nitrogen, but they don't always have the time, machinery, or help. it's not only helping take care of that situation, but it's also reducing the risk for the grower in terms of nitrogen.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, how many times we are seeing situations? How many times we are seeing situations that you see farmers that they went and they put 250 pounds. The season turned to be extremely dry, and all the nitrogen basically was left behind.
Yeah.
How many times we see that situation that that crop probably never even used that, maybe use 50 or 100 pounds, or how many times we see the opposite, no? I mean that you are running short because you have so much rain that most of that is being leached. I mean, if there is not enough mineralization, you're running low. Yeah. And sometimes these corrections are something that, sometimes I mean at least some of the two key points that I usually hear from farmers on how they think that technology might help them in the future is increasing their profits, on saving them some time.
Yeah.
I mean, labor is, of course, one of the pieces, as you mentioned. I think that, I mean, what the example that you provide on the deer side is what I believe to be, here is a problem, here is innovation. So for me, it's like, first let's talk about the problem, and let's build innovation to solve the problem.
Yeah, it's funny. I wasn't expecting to have that kind of light bulb go off, but again, you see all these little robots like spraying weeds, lasering, flaming weeds, whatever it may be. It's
well,
cool.
I do know we were working with a company that was looking at some nitrogen products. Excuse me, and they had a robot, and that robot would literally run itself down the rows, and it would. So essentially, every day of the growing season, this robot was monitoring underneath of the canopy chlorophyll levels, everything that it could reasonably do with imagery. But it was kind of funny because we've gotten used to this idea of drones flying around in the air, but literally watching this little robot, it's kind of funny to think about this little guy walking around in your field, looking at stuff for you. But the nitrogen component to me is a pretty interesting one, because it seems like the battle is, the penalty for over application is whatever the financial risk of loss is, right? So I end up with some off-target movement or unused nitrogen, right? But that seems like we've kind of accepted that as a portion of our financial risk.
Yes.
But what we know we absolutely can't do is not have enough, right?
Yes.
And so we both have really, I think, part of our worldview and the way we think about high yields, we're really attracted to this idea of split applications. Yes. And you talked about, I can remember vividly talking about 50% of your nitrogen in some sort of a safe early form,
yes.
and then being responsive. But I also think about a lot of growers that it's August 10th and they haven't got out of a sprayer yet.
Yes.
They haven't, they haven't had a summer yet, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like they're on the golf course when they otherwise should be putting nitrogen on. And so I really do think the idea of autonomy, both in forms of helping us understand where we're at with nitrogen and more real time, but also maybe even someday ways we can apply nitrogen more efficiently, because the real challenge of being timely with this stuff is just really difficult.
Yeah, agreed.
But I think we're going to talk about some things that we're hoping might
we
help
are
with that. So
Ignacio, I'm curious. You study nitrogen. You got teams studying digital agriculture. What are some ways that not just where your research is? What are some ways you're using digital technology new, whether it's satellite imagery, any way that you're using it new to maybe in a way that you're not used to?
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that gets me excited, because I remember 10 years ago when we were talking about nitrogen and we were talking about drones. I mean, that was the first thing, like probably 10 years ago, when people start talking about, we can probably do this with drones. And you start seeing now how things are evolving that fast. I mean, we talk about autonomy, and I think that autonomy is going to become something that is going to help many of the issues that farmers will say, okay, I don't have time to do this. I cannot be on top. And you will say, no worries. You have something that is running in the field, not only just for nitrogen. It's running the field, scouting, looking for disease, insects. It's just a complete plant health machine, right? So then when you start looking at in that way, you say, oh, that's different, because you are just having something that you have like a ring camera, no? If we want to put an analogy,
Yeah.
you have your ring camera that you can just click on the app and see what's going on in the field. And you could be remotely, or you can be with your family in Florida, taking the kids to vacation, and then you could just see what's going on in your fields. You can have a mapping, a digital mapping and records. And what is amazing to me is like this thing that we never discussed too much, but it's also that concept of traceability, no? Like the farmers will be able to understand what happened in their fields, because they might have like this digital footprint mapping, no? From every growing season to say, what happened in this field? Why have low yields on this area? So I can go back and then start looking at all these images from the rest of the season and saying, wow, I never realized that there was a disease that started cropping on this section of the field in August.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about that, the current way we're doing that is either satellite imagery, fixed wing, drones, maybe some robotics in the field. Do you have examples of that right now? And if you had to predict 5 to 10 years from now, is that going to be primarily done out of satellite imagery, or where's that advancement coming from?
I think that is really, the question is really good. I wish I could know exactly what, I wish you could have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there's going to be a mix of things. Because, for example, one of the things that we discuss with many people when we talk about not only nitrogen, but we talk about, for example, disease, fungicide application. So selecting what is the product that you need to apply, is knowing how much you need to have in the tank before you get to the field. So then you start thinking that some of the things, they need to be done previously to have the machine enter into the field. So then you start dreaming on the concept, okay, this is not going to be only just autonomy. So this needs to be probably a pre-fly mapping. It could be done with drone, it could be done with a plane, it could be done with a satellite. But something that gives you some idea of logistics, no? Identifying, scouting, saying, okay, this is a disease confirmed, this is the presence in the field, we need to target 20 acres, this is how much gallons we need to have in the autonomy to make sure it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've toyed around with, I think Andrew gets pitched every concept, right? But we've seen some really cool stuff where we've gone, man, we're just so close to these tools, being able to benefit us. It still seems like there's a little bit of the economic side of it, right? Yeah. Like some of this stuff is really difficult.
Yeah. and I think technology still needs to catch up in a lot of areas too.
Yeah. Well, and we have a tendency, going back to where we started, with what it's capable of versus what we're actually trying to solve for, right? And so I think there's some challenges on all fronts, right? Like, even if we know the information, is there a way that we can respond to it?
Yeah, that's where my mind was going too.
Yeah, do we have enough tools that as we understand those things? Specifically thinking about nitrogen, it still feels like we're a little bit limited.
Yep.
And then I also think we have a little bit of a philosophy problem, right? So like, guys are pretty much in, like, you have some guys that are split applicators no matter what. You have some guys that are going to preload everything no matter what. But I think there's also a burden of proof with this stuff, right? So the data is really solid that split application works. As we can continue to prove those things out, I think that kind of forces people into the funnel a little bit. So
go ahead. I was going to say, my mind immediately went to, as you were talking about disease and like within certain parts of the field, we have all this technology where you can get a plane to fly your field and give you images of individual insects and disease. Yeah. But again, what good does that do when you're reacting to a lesion or nitrogen deficiency? You're already too late. So as we advance, I know people are working on it, looking at new cameras that can identify certain wavelengths and maybe see respiration rates or something within a leaf change due to disease. So can you find something before the leaf even expresses it, right? Yeah. So that's where the technology, and as you bring up, being able to treat 20 acres of field, how cool would that be if, disease doesn't move in across the whole field, right? Spores moving in here and there, different patches of the field. So what if you could detect that and then send this machine to, that's pretty cool thinking about stuff like that.
Well, and if it was specific enough, like those wavelengths, can you tell potassium deficiency versus nitrogen deficiency? Yeah. Could you tell southern rust or tar spot and those sorts of things? I think people are trying. It's interesting, but let's hammer a couple of these out.
We should just go off like a 10-minute tangent.
Yes, I know.
What would be cool in 20 years?
Well,
and sometimes, sometimes one thing that is, at least for the audience to know is that sometimes we have technology that is super cool, but it's sometimes too early. And it happened in the past. I remember that we were working with a company also like 5 years ago that they were developing a concept that they have a box in the field where the drone was flying, automatically open the box, fly in the field, and then going back to the box, recharging, sending the data to the cloud, and you say, wow, we were a little bit too early. Because if you see how much all the regulations on flying drones changed in the last 5 years.
A lot.
So now that company will be excellent.
Yeah.
And I have a good friend that he's in Kansas, so he's, with Kelly Hills, he's Lucas, and he's testing technologies, and we have conversations. He was in our Digital Ag Symposium a couple of weeks ago, and we talk about all these challenges. And we say, okay, we are testing technology, but one of the main issues is like, how do we move from data to decisions?
Yeah. Well, and I promise I'll very short rant, and then we'll go back to the questions. One of the things that drives me crazy in my role, so before we started the podcast, Ignacio asked us if this is like our profession. Believe it or not, I actually have to earn a living, not just hanging out with Andrew. As much fun as that would be, one of the things I get really frustrated about, and I think it's the problem with. Really, it's a problem and a challenge with our whole industry, is oftentimes it seems like we want the farmer producer to both be the field testing agent and oftentimes assume the risk. And it's really frustrating to me. The companies that I have been eager to partner with and challenge farmers to consider are the ones that come out and say, hey, listen, producer, we're going to prove our technology to you and we're going to absorb the risk. Because the amount of times that there's this arrogant, what we can do for you attitude, and sometimes the technology is great and sometimes it isn't, but the reality is oftentimes we're asking, the farmer to pay for it. And that idea just really frustrates me because, I think the burden of proof is ultimately on the producer of the technology or the producer of the equipment or whatever.
And maybe just to add on that a little bit on that sometimes even the incentives are not enough. Like, for example, when you talk about this extra nitrogen application, we have seen I think that there was a survey done for Illinois. They have a large percentage of farmers that they tend to over-apply around average 30-40 pounds. But it's an insurance. If you look at the cost and saying, how much is that 30-40 pounds extra? And I'm always concerned that I'm going to be limited, my yields because of that. So, and even in those guys that I appreciate that they exist, the guys that they move into a split application, when you start looking at the economics, maybe they are making 10, 20, so average, in terms of dollars per acre in saving nitrogen and something else. And then for many farmers will say, that's not enough for me.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Andrew, you wrote
We're
a script?
Back on.
Let's stick to it.
Every once in a while we do.
Tell me about what you mean when you say we're moving towards traditional versus quantitative agriculture.
This is just trying to challenge my colleagues.
Okay.
And mainly just to say we really need to move on the direction of training the new thinkers, the next generation of people. All my conversations with some of the industry folks that are talking about we would like to get a plant breeder that can also do or knows how to collect data and understand about the sensors. And then you realize that they're all the time looking at these new people that is going to be training a topic, but also knowing how to get out, how to get resources, how to go and talk to the guy working on different disciplines. And for me, it's like sometimes, from the university side too, or from the research side too, we tend to dummy down too much. Our science into a point that, okay, it's good because we want to keep things simple and the farmer is asking you at the end of the day, how much do I need to apply? Yep. And I remember having a 1 hour call with a farmer explaining about uncertainty, explaining about the weather, and then the last minute on the conversation, he's saying, and how much?
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
But how much should I apply?
and I'm like, what happened the last 55 minutes?
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm like, but then at the same time, I say, let's look at what happens in other disciplines. No, let's look at what happens in many other places. Many other times, I mean, I turn on the TV and I say, okay, the weather for tomorrow is going to be 50% chances of rain. No, they're not telling me you should go and take an umbrella. They're giving you enough information so you are the one deciding and taking what level of risk. Do you want to get the umbrella out? Do you want to? I think that we were talking about this kind of a similar example last time. Sometimes we need to think about how do we talk to people in that way too, just to show them that what we are working on is super complex. It's not something that let's not mention or at least give the impression to people that the agronomy, the farming is simple. The science is complex. As you mentioned before, the decision of the optimal end rate is impossible.
Right.
I mean, I talk to some guys and I say, you guys are chasing ghost.
Yeah.
You're chasing a ghost because every year is changing. It depends on the weather conditions around flowering most of the times. And you can just, I talk to the farmer and I might get the best guess that even if I run 20,000 models.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, I say, we haven't fully used the data that we have been collected. Because we have been doing research for the last 50 years. I mean, nitrogen has been researched for the last more than 100 years. I remember checking on one paper when I was doing my PhD from Purdue that was already doing tissue nutrient analysis in 1898.
Wow.
Oh, wow. It does seem to be that one nutrient guys study their entire career and don't have an answer. It's complicated.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
We're also at a time that I guess I've been encouraged since we both started this podcast, but also maybe just a shift in the way that we've approached our growers. I do feel like there is a segment of farmers that are starting to say, hey, we have all this technology. Let's do more on-farm testing, right? So let's take the learnings from guys like you and your team, and let's actually go out and test that. Sometimes it gets a little heartbreaking, right? So like a year like this, we have some phenomenal growers and partners that did some incredible testing, and then something else becomes the limiting factor and kind of wipes all that data out. But it is the way it goes sometimes. So I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, but one of the main concept, one of the main ideas of this, why we talk about the idea of being more quantitative, is only just to introduce the point that let's move on building our decisions based on the data. Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, as a researcher, as a scientist, I cannot talk to a farmer and only just use my best guess. Yeah. I should just make sure that I have enough data that can back me up, and then moving in this idea of saying, let's be a little bit more, I mean, science-based, data-driven, but also knowing that I'm an agronomist talking. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I have a responsibility that I need to, all this research needs to be translated into something.
Yeah. Yep.
And most of the times in the past happens many situations that we are doing studies in multiple locations and we talk about outcomes coming from multiple locations. But we already know that if we move 50 miles out of the place where you did that research, we know already that the complexity of the weather and that the lack of ability of building some predictions is a problem. If we cannot start using the data, and that's the concept of being a little bit more quantitative, and start building predictions and building some level of probabilities, no? Then when you talk to the farmer, you can explain that. I think that farmers are very smart. Sometimes we tend to undermine or really just to say, well, I will keep it simple. Man, they are very, very smart, sharp.
They want more in-depth information.
And they want to be involved in the decision. They want to be, this idea of doing co-innovation, as we discussed at the beginning with industry, they want to do that process with you too. They would like to listen to you, not just because they want to get a response. They want to learn how is the way that you are thinking and how is the way that you are getting to that final response.
Yep. Ignacio, we were lucky enough to have we had lunch with you at a Commodity Classic out in Denver, and I remember we talked a lot about some interesting stuff, and I remember right towards the end, you brought up some of the stuff you're doing with the NASA satellites.
Yes.
And we didn't have enough time to dive into it, but it really got me thinking about kind of where we've been in ag, and now we got people using NASA satellites to do some research. So tell me a little bit about that. How you're using them, what benefit is to you, and what that technology is bringing to your lab.
I think that you're gonna get super excited about this. We start talking to multiple people, and this came from many collaborations. So I start working in close collaboration with a professor at University of Champaign in Illinois, and then one of the things that we start talking is about this idea of looking at nitrogen sensing. So and then I start talking about this concept that I was working on developing this nitrogen nutrition index, no? And it's just super simple. It's something that is a metric that is based on the physiology of the plant. As the plants are growing, the plants are diluting nitrogen. So when you look at a small corn plant, it has 4 or 5% concentration of nitrogen. As the plant is growing, usually it grows faster than the uptake. So because if it's growing faster than the uptake, dry matter, so you have an uncouple. So basically what happens is that nitrogen that it was early in the season, it gets diluted. And that dilution is very universal. I found that in one of my publications 3 years ago, I took data from many countries around the world, and I say, I will do this testing. I will put this information and look at the dilution to see if the corn is yielding different or if the biomass is different. Is this dilution different? And we found that even looking at different hybrid companies or maturity groups, CRMs, exactly the same. So we say, if we develop a metric based on this, and if we can tell to someone when you are sufficient in nitrogen or deficient, or in excess, this will be the way that we can start getting closer to build something that is more universal. So we're not talking about a vegetation index like NDVI, or we're talking about a metric that really gives us something that is, nitrogen deficiency.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the conversations. And in fact, we're working on a very cool project. The guys from Illinois are driving this hyperspectral sensor with a plane. And they're driving into multiple states, and they're really basically the future is they're collecting this data and start building monitoring of nitrogen in farmer fields during the growing season. So which 5 years ago you never thought about this idea that you could have during the growing season seeing if your field is deficient and someone sending you an alert.
Yeah.
So that is the way that we start talking to some of the people from NASA, and then. To explain a little bit briefly, NASA is very big. When people talk about NASA, they start thinking about rockets, and I say I would love to see a rocket and launch. I mean, that's something that is on my to-do list, on my bucket list. But the ag portion of NASA is very small. And when you talk to farmers and people, they usually they are not very familiar to what is NASA agriculture doing for them. So, and there is a consortium within the NASA piece that is called NASA Acres. So NASA Acres is a domestic consortium that is basically led by University of Maryland. And there is a director, so Alisa is one of the directors, and she's awesome as a scientist and very well connected down to earth with farmers. This big project is basically tackling multiple uses of satellite in whatever you imagine, like a monitoring cover crops adoption, looking at yield forecast, looking at irrigation and water, looking at, for example, we are doing some projects on quality, prediction of oil and protein on crops. Super cool. We look at all the portfolio, and then at some point I got involved from different conversations that someone say, hey, you should talk to this guy. He's an awesome agronomist, and he loves technology. And then we start talking, they brought me in, and we start thinking about what should be very useful for NASA in the future, and what would be where we can start involving farmers on this process.
So a couple questions, I guess. So thinking about this idea, so you talked about that currently they're using an airplane, right? A fixed wing plane, and they're taking hyperspectral imagery. So chlorophyll isn't always an indication of dilution of nitrogen in a plant, and this might be too complex for this, but I guess can you give me a relatively concise version of what is that image? how does that image know, right? Because this is something we've struggled with. Is you
go
have
back like the greenness.
Yes.
Well, right.
Chlorophyll compact.
Yeah. So I guess is that even possible to explain to a ding dong like me?
This is the nerd science portion.
No.
Right?
I mean, I will try to keep it very simple. When I talked about the dilution, the main idea of the dilution is that you need two things in order to build a really good nitrogen metric. You should know what is the current biomass, what is the size of the plant today,
correct,
and what is your nitrogen concentration. So if you can predict those two things, then you have the ability of building this metric.
Say that again for me. You need to know the size of the biomass.
You need to know the size.
So total physical plant material.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you need to know how much nitrogen is within that plant.
Okay. And that's a relatively easy answer to get to because we can,
with the hyperspectral, for example, if you are saying now we are connecting plain hyperspectral with some satellite data.
Mm-hmm.
And now you start connecting some other sensors. For example, you can bring, for example, radar. And sometimes, some of the radar is really good for star prediction of biomass. And if you look at shortwave infrared or some of the near infrared, some of those wavelengths, on the hyperspectral side, they really are targeting most of the time nitrogen. So then you start building something that is physiologically, when we go back to why we are connecting technology with agronomy and physiology, is because the physiology tells us that if we can get these two traits and parameters connected, and if we can predict them really well, then we can build one of the best metric, and it could be universal for many farmer fields in the world.
So biomass is relatively simple, right? LiDAR and
yes.
other. So we can build that pretty easy. Can you use a camera and get nitrogen concentration? No kidding. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Is that something that you put on a has to be on a drone or a fixed wing? Or is that...
Yeah, we have some data. And again, most of this goes back to some of the basic foundational research. We have some data that shows that the upper developed leaf, in many situations, if you look at the upper part of the canopy, that leaf is a good indicator of the rest of the canopy. Mm-hmm. And then if you look at until at least B12, B14, most of this is really good indicator of basically what is the overall nitrogen status of that plant.
It's pretty cool.
When you talk about wanting a diverse group of people to come be around this stuff, these are the moments that I'm like, holy cow, kids, get in agriculture, right? Because I do think we've gone through waves, right, where it can feel like a pretty mature process, and if you asked a young person today, do you want to work in ag? It's like, no, I don't want to go scoop dry fertilizer into a bin at a retail location, right? But that technology, it literally almost gives me chills to think about the fact that my sons may be looking at maps on their phone going, okay, do we add nitrogen or not based on these things? That's incredible technology. You mentioned...
and let me add, if I can add something on the NASA piece. I want to, also advertise a little bit on this because we built a program, and this was, some vision coming from one of the NASA administrators. They are very supportive from, and working with farmers across the U.S. We built a program that is called FIAT, that we launched at the Commodity Classic. So it's a Farmer Innovation Ambassador team. So the way that we build the program, we are basically having farmers from multiple states. So we have a farmer from Iowa that is working with NASA and this program. We have that is also working with Iowa Corn. We have a farmer from Kansas, a farmer from Oklahoma, from California. So this is a group of farmers that are dedicating time of their busy days and talking to us. Usually we start talking now to them in a very regular basis. And what we are asking them is, what are the things that you would like to see coming from NASA?
Yep.
What is the thing that, if you have something that you can get from NASA agriculture now, that you will say, I would love to have this?
So let's talk about these yield predictability models using imagery. So that's been talked about, that we could get historical yield through imagery and then also do some predictive yield. So talk a little bit about that, and then talk about maybe accuracy. I keep thinking about August 15th scouting fields this year, and to say I was way off is an understatement, right? I mean, we weren't even close, right? I mean, I think I would have liked to tag NASA in because we were scouting fields on August 15th, and we had rows around, we had kernels long, we had population. We're using
giant kernels.
We're using what we believed, and then we came in and realized that we didn't fill that grain, right? So let me ask a specific question. A NASA model, a NASA acre model relative to my yield monitor.
Yeah.
What's my deviation going to be?
And depends on, as a good agronomist, we usually say it depends, but it also depends on the timing. So I usually say this because, for example, let's say that if you are already passing pollination, so if you already pass flowering time, so your model is pretty good. And if you don't have enough, I mean, this year was particularly different because with the stress conditions coming in late season, so you probably have a lot of impact on the kernel weight. So your kernel weight was one of the things that was basically suffering. And you know that for corn, you have some flexibility. We talk about this plasticity, and kernel weight could be contribute between sometimes 10 to 30% of the yield. So which means that sometimes, I mean, in a good growing season, you might see that the contribution is only 20%. In a very poor growing season, that impact on kernel weight could basically take you at least 20, 30% of the yield, of the total yield. So, and imagine how good could be the model that is not seeing that yet. So that's one of the things that I always say to everyone, no? I usually struggle myself, and I talk to even my students about saying, why you're looking for perfection, and why we are always trying to look for perfection, no? And why we are not looking for something that is better than what we have already now. It looks like we are always in life not chasing what is going to come next, and you're
afraid
always
to
saying,
fail or something,
right? And you're always thinking about, okay, I want to have a better house or a better car, or maybe go on vacation to another place that you haven't been, no? But we're always thinking about better, perfect, or better than I'm today, or today is something missing all the time. And I always tell that because I say, if we don't have a yield forecast model today, and if you give me one that it works reasonable well, that has a 10% error, I will take it every day. But I will put a disclosure saying, this model today, when you're running the model, no, at flowering, is not seeing the rest of the growing season. So the best prediction that it's doing is just saying, based on what you are seeing today, your yield projection is this one. And believe me, when I compare, because we did this exercise a couple of years ago of comparing a satellite data, no, from early season until flowering, no, and connecting this with yield monitor. And when you look at the two, you couldn't see almost a difference. And when you start seeing more differences is, as you described today, that situation where you have a stress after flowering is when basically satellite has not seen that. So it's impossible for that satellite model to predict something that it didn't happen yet. So, and then the models are going to become better, no? As you start running the model closer to harvest, the model is going to become better and your prediction is going to be corrected, no? It's going to be adjusted. So.
Yep. I keep thinking about the Pro Farmer Tour or whatever, and coming out with these yield predictions. And when they came out with those yield predictions, that were just absurdly high, that was when we jumped in a truck at my place and drove from central Iowa to south central Illinois to go to University of Illinois' Crop Phys Day. Yeah. And it was funny because we were driving on the road, and it was Andrew and I and a grower, and we're like, my God, the crop looks incredible. I mean, all the way through the state of Iowa.
Were green.
And what we were driving by was a radical amount of southern rust that we couldn't see. And so this goes to my idea that not sure who should be paying for this, right? But what we were all doing is what we've been taught to do: walk out, count kernels around, count length, and then apply however optimistic or not optimistic you are. But I don't think anybody realized how widespread that issue was. Yeah. And we realized it like very siloed, right? Like exactly. The company agronomist realized it, and then a university person realized it, but nobody's collectively, drawing that map. And so I do think then we talk about the economics for the farmer. So you've got the industry screaming, best crop we've ever had, right?
Yeah.
Well, what happens? Corn prices plummet. You know, you think about those decisions we could have made that would have increased the crop. If we would have had more accurate information, I believe we would have made different management practice decisions. I think you would have seen people choose to utilize fungicides differently.
Yeah. We all thought the yields, like the Pro Farmer Tour, we all thought the yields were going to be phenomenal because we had adequate moisture around tassel, right? We were set up to have massive kernels,
huge,
massive kernels. We just needed to fill them. We're not used to that, and so we're all kind of caught off guard. If we would have had the technology in 10 years where we could see southern rust spores moving in and infecting a plant, maybe fields changing, right?
And I think about, you know, I'll leave company names out of it, but there are a couple companies that you can pay that do, you know, some really good imagery stuff, right? And you know, but again, a farmer's going to do that, and that farmer's going to be exposed to their acres, right? So you don't have that collectively across, you know, large acres of the Corn Belt where you could start to piece it together and say, holy cow, X% of Iowa, you know, I mean, because you could start to pretty intuitively say, at 20% leaf coverage with a disease like southern rust, we know we're going to have a certain amount of disease. And then if we could amplify that by the acres we knew covered, you could start to actually make some really good market predictions. And it just seems like that stuff just flew by, and then all of a sudden everybody's shocked, you know. So,
and that's why exactly we have, I mean, it's exactly why we want to have the formation of this new project or program within NASA, because we want to make sure that we have farmers telling us and working with researchers to say, what is the thing that if you have access to this, then you can make better decisions. And I think that the yield forecast is something that they would like to know. Better weather, I mean, if you look at better weather, is something that they always say, I mean, the weather or data that we have today is not good enough.
Yeah.
And if you have like something that it will tell you or gives you some information at the field level now of how your crop is changing over time. So if you have access to saying, oh, I can see my green chlorophyll vegetation changing every day, then you will start capturing some of the things, because you will be able to say, oh, why there is a disruption based on the current projections. Now, and you could just map basically last 20, I mean, whatever number of years you have from satellite data to say, is this projection of the senescence of after flowering, is that normal, or is it something that is a normality?
Yeah.
And you will be able to start capturing most of these things much faster.
Yeah.
Much faster.
Literally, there's 1,000 things I'm thinking about coming off this year, but for the sake of time,
I'm excited for it. It's, you know, as I write the questions, there's usually always 1, 2 to sometimes 4 or 5 questions that I'm just super excited to hear the answer. I'm just like, man, that's a phenomenal question. This one I'm super, and not that I write it, but I just want to hear the answer.
Every once in a while, just so you know, I get hey, that was a good question. He will occasionally. You know, compliment.
So this question that is really good is coming from him.
Correct.
This
at
one
least
is.
in his mind.
Yes, this one is. So
he's a brilliant question writer.
Ignacio, what's your thoughts on? I've heard you talk about this in some of your talks. What's your thoughts on managing different yield or field zones versus the future of managing individual plants as technology and our cameras become more advanced?
Yeah, I mean that's a tremendous question. I mean, if I want to be super,
he already knows. You don't have to bump his head up any bigger. Here's the problem: is if his head gets any bigger, we're going to have to order like a plus size headset for him. So.
If I look at the
correct, it's almost that big right now.
It's almost that big now.
So it's gotten that big.
I mean, if you want to be super futuristic and not having a lot of context, you will say, oh, we will be able in a few years to start managing plants. I'm more worried that first we should do it's almost like when you go to first elementary school, middle school, high school. So for me, it's like it's hard to start thinking about managing plants if I don't have yet most of my farmers managing zones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really hard to think about the concept that you will be managing plants when you cannot manage zones. It's almost like I make that joke of some people. You say sometimes if you are driving any kind of a regular car, when they give you a sport, nice-looking car, you don't even know what to do with it. So you need to have some level of progression on moving in technology, I think. And for me, it's like the first step is let's start moving into recognizing that fields have variability, right? And many fields have a lot of variability. So if we can start increasing profits by managing and being more effective on managing the fields, I think that would be amazing. Can we get to the point that we can start managing plants? Sure. I think that at some point we're going to get there. But for me, it's like I would like to get management zones, and then I would like to get management, what I will call like a collective of plants. I would like to start managing a group
maybe
of
10 plants.
Exactly. Start managing a group of plants. No? And once I get better in that, then I can start thinking about plant basis, because everyone likes to talk about plant management. And you say, okay, yes, sure. In how many years?
Right.
So let's be realistic at one point, and let's think about what the farmer is dealing today, all the complexity. And you want to throw to this guy a bigger level of complexity. I mean, but like saying that he needs to start thinking about plant. So let's make sure that he recognizes he can make more money by just start managing zones first.
Yep, well said.
Once you start managing those zones, is there any more variability within these zones? Can we start cutting costs on this one? Can I increase application on this one? And once you start getting really good, you are graduating every level. And then your final level of graduation is going to be you men can manage plants with no problem.
Yeah. I'm reminded of Sean Castile on our last episode. He mentioned he's got called the old curmudgeon. I feel like the old curmudgeon here, because I still remember going like with our seed metering, our planters going from, you could just control 30 within 2 to 4,000. Now we can see individual seeds, spacing, double, skips, all that.
Yeah.
Well, and then when you're saying that, I instantly go to, we have a whole system problem, though. I mean, there are still ag retailers that don't want a variable rate dry fertilizer, right? And right now, guilty as sin, the vast majority of the people that I know are putting a flat rate of nitrogen across every acre of their farm, right? And we unequivocally know, just by looking at our yield maps, that we have high yielding areas and low yielding areas. There probably are parts of our field that can hold nitrogen and need more nitrogen, and then there's a bunch of areas that we know we're just dumping it away. So it is. Somebody the other day, not the other day, a couple months ago, mentioned 1,000 bushel cornfield, 1,000 bushel acre, and my first gut reaction I was I kind of scoffed, and then I was like, boy. A couple years ago, 200 was kind of a wild number, and now you have a national record in the 600s. And so the speed at which technology is making these things possible is impressive. But we also, as an industry, need to catch up too, right? Because I mean, some of what an individual farmer might want to do versus what the industry is ready to do could be on very polar opposite. Ignacio, for the sake of time, would like to offer you encouragement. Thank you for what you and your team are doing.
Absolutely.
Super excited about the work. I think especially something that will be really kind of a first for a lot of our listeners is to hear about some of these partnerships with the NASA Acre stuff.
That's cool.
And usually my gut response to that stuff is feeling like that's going to be way off in the future, and it probably isn't, right? I mean, we're going to start to reap some of the benets of that right
and I
away.
think that is one of my main goals on this is by involving farmers is rethinking the way that we do things. It's like this is a co-innovation.
Yeah.
We don't want to just be on the driver's seat and telling to the guys, hey, we'll get you. This is your problem. Yeah. Don't worry. We want to get them involved in the process and saying, this is what I need.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the most efficient way we can start to improve the process. For all of our listeners and viewers, thank you for your passion. I think that it's something that we can't innovate without creative and passionate people. And your idea of collaborating and bringing a lot of people together, I think, is just critical for our industry. Looking forward to discussing how we can take these ideas and incorporate them into management, but just greatly appreciate your time today.
Awesome episode.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. I usually say always to everyone, I always enjoy talking to you, both of you, and every time that I have see you, I mean, we have a chance to talk. I mean, it's always very enjoyable. So
thank you.
We'll be back with some management.
We will be.